I have personally observed a prisoner's lungs burst. The rehearsals have produced such pressure on the heads of these men that they would go mad and tear their hair out in a desperate effort to alleviate that dreadful feeling. These were the observations of Sigmund Rascher, an SS scientist in the days of the Nazi Empire. Although most people remember Joseph Mengele, the truth is that Dr. Rascher conducted equally cruel and aberrational experiments. Everyone in the Third Reich knew him because he had the full confidence of Heinrich Himmler, one of the most important Nazi hierarchs. Hundreds of people fell victim to Rascher, who was obsessed with proving his wild medical theories. Do not move from your screen because in the next few minutes we will tell you all about the experiments of Sigmund Rascher, the mad scientist of the SS. Sigmund Rascher was born on February 12, 1909 in Munich, Germany, into a wealthy family. Since he was a child, he knew that he would follow in the footsteps of his father, who was a doctor, so at the age of 21 he enrolled in the university to study medicine. At the beginning of the 1930s, he showed an interest in the ideas of Nazism, which preached hatred towards the supposed inferior races, communism and democracy. However, he did not join the National Socialist Party until 1933. Rascher always insisted that he joined the movement before Hitler came to power, but documentation shows that he did so after the Führer had become master and lord of Germany. This shows that, from the beginning of his career, he took advantage of every opportunity that came his way in order to consolidate himself as a scientist. For some time, Rascher worked as an assistant in his father's medical office. On the other hand, he tried to climb positions within Nazism and joined the SA, that is, the Brown Shirts. In 1939, he joined the SS and entered the Luftwaffe, one of Hitler's most devoted military bodies. That same year, Rascher reported his own father to the Gestapo, accusing him of anti-Nazi behavior. This fact earned him enormous prestige within the movement, because he demonstrated that his fanaticism was so great that he was capable of betraying his family for the National Socialist cause. His meteoric rise did not stop there, but continued as he married Nini Diehl, a former actress and singer. Diehl had been the mistress of Heinrich Himmler, with whom she was still on friendly terms. In fact, it was common for her to write to the SS leader asking for favors such as money, food or reduced taxes. Thus, thanks to his new wife, Rascher managed to get closer to the most influential social circles of the Third Reich. Barely a week after meeting Himmler, the doctor presented him with a project to cure cancer through a treatment with plants, although he warned him that it was necessary to use humans as guinea pigs. The SS leader agreed and authorized the plan, which, although unsuccessful, served to connect these two men, as they shared a twisted interest in science. Starting in the spring of 1941, Sigmund Rascher began his most bloody and abominable experiments. At the time, the Luftwaffe was developing an aircraft capable of climbing to high levels to evade British fighter bombers. In this context, our macabre protagonist offered to lead an investigation into the effects of depressurization at high altitudes. He wrote Himmler a letter asking permission to experiment on concentration camp prisoners, something the SS leader enthusiastically authorized. The research was conducted in a decompression chamber from which air could be extracted to simulate conditions at 20,000 meters high. People were introduced into the apparatus and, once inside, the oxygen was removed to observe their reaction. Some died instantly, but others went into convulsions, their faces distorted and their eyes swelled until they looked as if they were going to burst. As we told you at the beginning of the video, a brutal end awaited these patients. The tests in the depressurization chamber did not provide any significant information, so Rascher's victims died in vain. In 1942, he conducted another round of experiments, this time involving freezing. The objective was to solve the problem of airplane pilots who, after crashing, fell into icy waters and died of hypothermia. Rascher asked Himmler for 300 concentration camp prisoners to use as guinea pigs. Some were forced to remain naked for 14 hours in the open field, in the middle of a heavy snowfall. Others were submerged in a tank of ice water for 3 hours, while their vital signs were monitored with electrodes. Next, the patients were rescued from the cold, and different ways of warming them up were tried. The most harmless methods consisted of giving them alcohol or covering them with blankets. The cruelest, however, were based on immersing them in tanks of boiling water or injecting hot liquid into their stomachs. Soon after, Himmler approved Rascher's latest craze, an experimental drug called Polygal, supposedly able to stop bleeding. To demonstrate this, the scientist forced his patients to ingest the drug and then ordered them to be shot in the chest and neck. Others underwent limb amputations without anesthesia, all with the aim of proving that bleeding decreased as a result of Polygal. Rascher's downfall came in 1944, after a series of mistakes and missteps. The scientist had deceived Himmler, announcing that he had found a way to extend the fertile period of women. Thus, they would be able to have children until an advanced age, something that caught the attention of the SS leader, who was obsessed with increasing the birth rate. Rascher announced that his wife, Nini, had given birth to 3 children despite the fact that she was almost 50 years old. However, what was actually happening is that the scientist was instructing his assistant, Julie Muschler, to steal infants, falsify documentation, and pass them off as his children. The Rascher couple went to the extreme of murdering their accomplice to erase the traces of their crimes. Julie, the assistant, was summoned to a cabin in the mountains, far from the cities, and once there, the scientist strangled her with his bare hands. The body was left out in the open, and for 2 years no one found it. In 1944, Rascher's wife was arrested at a train station, while trying to kidnap a baby. The subsequent investigation revealed that the couple's children had been stolen from other families and that their own assistant had been killed. Himmler was furious, and as punishment he sent them to concentration camps. Sigmund Rascher ended up detained in Buchenwald and later transferred to Dachau, while Nini Deal ended up in Ravensbrück, where they remained locked up for months. On April 26, 1945, when the Third Reich was on the verge of defeat, Himmler ordered the execution of the former SS scientist. According to a witness, the executioner shot him with his rifle and left him to bleed to death on the ground while he did not stop kicking him. Finally, he finished him off with a shot to the head. Shortly after, his wife was sentenced to death by hanging by piano wire. Thus concluded the story of one of the worst criminals of the Third Reich. We reached the end of the video, and we want to ask you, do you think Rascher was worse than Mengele? Among the sinister characters who were with Adolf Hitler during the Holocaust, many were arrested by the Allies, and, after the war, they had to face justice in Nuremberg. However, there were other infamous men, remembered for having carried out the most terrible acts of violence, torture or humiliation in history, and who never paid for their crimes. Many murderers never managed to be located neither by the Western armies, nor by the organizations that were dedicated to hunting Nazis, nor by the new German justice. One of them was the terrible Aribert Heim, better known as Dr. Death, who officiated as an SS doctor in the Mauthausen concentration camp. Along with Alois Brunner and Adolf Eichmann, Heim formed the triad of SS officers most wanted by justice. Although his branch was gynecology, Heim used his role in the medical ward to conduct horrific experiments on Jewish prisoners who served as guinea pigs. Also, he had the habit of murdering the sick for pleasure, through fatal injections that he inoculated directly into the heart. This macabre torturer was persecuted for decades, but managed to evade the law, although his end is still being debated, and there is a possibility that he died in an act of citizen justice. Join us in a new episode of Military History. Aribert Heim was not one of the historical officers of the Schutzstaffel, one of those who accompanied Adolf Hitler from the beginning of his crusade to liberate the world from the races he considered inferior. In fact, Heim was born in 1914, which is why he lived through the rise of Nazism to power during his childhood. The influence of National Socialist propaganda had a profound effect on the young Aribert, who, at the age of 25 and after graduating as a doctor at the University of Vienna, volunteered for the Waffen-SS. From 1940, Heim became part of the medical corps of the Nazi paramilitary unit, and his work was so well received that, in less than a year, his superiors gave him the rank of captain. But Heim would truly be remembered for his activities in 1941, the date on which he was appointed official physician of the Mauthausen concentration and extermination camp. There he would spend 2 months in charge of the ward where the sick and wounded were sent, but this short time would be enough for Heim to earn the infamous nickname of Dr. Death. This was because the macabre butcher carried out terrible experiments, using Jewish prisoners as human guinea pigs. It is important to note that Mauthausen was one of the largest camps operated by the Nazis, seeing as many as 85,000 prisoners together, scattered across different subcamps. This huge number of test subjects gave Heim enough confidence to unleash his sadism in the name of his alleged scientific research. Although he is often associated with Joseph Mengele, a geneticist who also conducted gruesome scientific tests on Jewish prisoners, it has never been proven that Heim knew this man or that they had any kind of relationship. Indeed, the few survivors of Dr. Death's bloody deeds, often just a handful of a group of more than 100, assured the court that Heim's motives were entirely personal. Marcelino Bilbao, one of the Spanish prisoners who managed to get out of Mauthausen alive, assured that Heim reflected his own fear of death in his actions. But what were these sinister tortures? For 2 months, Heim experimented with the effects that different liquids could have when injected directly into the human bloodstream. To answer this concern, Dr. Death inoculated his victims with water, petroleum, phenol, or chlorine. He also tested a wide variety of known poisons, and other substances that he did not declare even to his own assistants. In many cases, the injections were made directly into the heart, to see if there were faster reactions than those caused by the punctures in the veins. The stories of the victims, as well as their laboratory assistants, who in many cases were Jews with a medical background forced to serve in the pavilion, shocked the world. Another cruel recurring method of Heim was the amputation of limbs of the sick, which he used to perform without anesthetizing the patients. Castration, both of males and females, as well as unnecessary biopsies and organ removal, were a daily horror at the camp medical pavilion, earning Heim another nickname, this time given by his own peers, who they ended up calling him the Butcher of Mauthausen. After 2 months of carrying out these practices on a daily basis, the lives of hundreds and even thousands of Jews ended at the cruel hands of Dr. Death. There are rumors that, faced with his abhorrent practices, his own superiors requested that he be relieved of his post. This happened at the beginning of 1942, when he was posted within the 6th SS Nordmountain Division, in northern Finland, where he practiced as a doctor for his SS compatriots. Nothing more was known about this obscure character until the end of the war, when, in 1945, the Allies managed to capture him along with his battalion. Not suspecting that it was the infamous Dr. Doom, they treated Heim like a common soldier. He was sent to a prison camp and later to work as a gynecologist in the German city of Baden-Baden. But in 1962 the Butcher of Mauthausen managed to escape, under strange circumstances that were never clear, since it is believed that he received help from his captors. It was precisely in that year when it was decided to investigate him as a war criminal, due to the statements of the prisoners who lived in the concentration camp during his activities. According to interrogations that his children would answer later, Aribert Heim first fled to Spain, from where he traveled to France, to later relocate to Morocco. Both international justice and the organizations dedicated to hunting Nazis launched a global alert to locate Heim. Possible sightings occurred in Europe, Africa, and Latin America, which made the search very difficult. It is also believed that he was helped by characters such as Otto Skorzeny, the mythical former Nazi soldier based in South America who assisted in the escape of several SS officers. He was also located in Portimont, Chile, where his daughter was found by the Mossad service in the 70s. Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Egypt and Spain were other countries where Dr. Death could have resided during his escape. It was also verified that, Between 1979 and 1983, Himmler lived in Uruguayan territory, since he maintained a gynecological office open to the public. According to the story told by his family, Bert Himmler met his death in 1992 in Brazil, at the hands of a squad of Nazi hunters who, seeking to take justice into their own hands, murdered the butcher of Mauthausen. But both the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Jerusalem and the French hunter Serge Klarsfeld deny that this is true. In 1993, Himmler's children tried to collect a fortune that the German had kept in a bank, but when the entity asked them for a death certificate or proof of his father's death, they replied that they didn't have any. Himmler was wanted until 2012, but finally the court investigating the case decided to consider him dead, and took the date indicated by his children as official. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. Stay tuned for our next video.